Thank you all for being here. My name is Adam Ramadan. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies and the Associate Provost for Research. So I welcome you to AUC. This is the official or formal launch event of the AUC Climate Change Initiative. This is an initiative that actually was put together in fall 2021. And it will, as you'll hear President Dallal talk about it, it sort of encompasses all the different activities that are taking place at AUC, that will be taking place at AUC now, before COP27, beyond COP27, related to climate change and sustainable development. We have a history of expertise in that, and the initiative, one of the main objectives of the initiative is to highlight the expertise we have, but also foster collaborations within AUC and between AUC and other entities to actually continue working on that, leaving an impact and helping Egypt, the region, also address issues related to climate change. So I would like to invite to the podium President Ahmad Dallal, President of the AUC.
Thank you, Dr. Ramadan. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. I want to start, of course, by welcoming our keynote speaker, Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for Egypt. It is indeed a great privilege to have Dr. Mohiddin join us today, albeit virtually, for the launch of the AUC Climate Change Initiative. I will, of course, introduce Dr. Mohiddin in a few minutes more formally, but allow me first to start by saying a few words about the initiative that Dr. Ramadan just mentioned. The initiative started in fall 2021 in response to the worldwide climate change challenges and the active role academic and research institutions can play in understanding and addressing these challenges. The initiative includes research, academic programming, student activities, tracking and reducing of carbon footprint, writing textbooks on climate change for schools, and providing climate solutions in specific contexts within the country. Our aim in this initiative is to reinforce AUC's role as an active academic hub on climate change and sustainable development in Egypt and the region, as well as an active contributor to global efforts addressing climate change challenges. Of course, COP27, hosted in Egypt in November, provides an incentive to catalyze AUC's climate change initiative, and we hope it really gave us a push. And our hope is that we can contribute to the efforts that are mobilized in this in COP27. So to the extent that we can, we are hoping that we'll be able to make some contribution, at least to this broader, larger effort. Larger effort, by the way, which is not just significant for Egypt. Egypt, as you well know, and as perhaps our speaker will address this topic, I don't know if he will. Egypt, in a way, the global South is looking to Egypt to provide a perspective which is unique on issues related to climate change and the way to deal with climate change. So Egypt, COP27 is not just important as yet another COP. It is a very unique COP. And everyone is looking up to Egypt to make a significant dent in the way we approach the subject. And our hope is that we contribute in our way, in our modest way, to this larger effort, which is not just a national effort, it is a global effort. We hope to do this by supporting and further enhancing multidisciplinary research collaborations within our institution and between AUC and national, regional, and international partners. And in fact, we have quite a few of these collaborations already underway. The coordinator of the initiative is Dr. Adham Ramadan, the Dean of Graduate Studies and Associate Provost for Research. It's quite appropriate that this initiative be coordinated by the Dean of Graduate Studies and the Associate Dean for Research because of the very importance of the extreme importance of research in this initiative. And heading the task force for AUC's participation in COP27 is Dr. Hani Swalim, who's the director of the Center for Applied Research on Environment and Sustainability. And I will say a little more about this center in a minute. But this is also a campus-wide initiative. that literally involves tens of AUC community members, faculty, students, other community members across various departments and units that are working, I dare say, in some cases relentlessly and consistently in research, in teaching, in outreach and student activities to achieve its objectives. Forgive me for not mentioning all the names. If I do, I will spend quite a lot of time. But just to say that this is a collaborative effort across the institution. It has been and it continues to be a collaborative effort across the institution. The initiative focuses on 5 main areas that are fully aligned with national and regional climate change and sustainability priorities. These areas of focus also intersect with a number of cross-cutting issues that are of relevance to Egypt and the region. And let me very briefly say what these issues are. I know that you want to hear Dr. Mohiddin speak, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. But the issues are adaptation to climate change and resilience of communities, mitigation measures to climate change, and education and just transition. We encourage a multidisciplinary approach in addressing challenges, including policy, regulatory frameworks, financing, scientific research, and social science aspects. The initiative's first area of focus is water-related issues. In Egypt, the risk of water poverty are exacerbated by uncoordinated water management development projects in the Nile Basin, leading to increased risks to the productivity of the agricultural land and to food security. A prime example of AUC's work in addressing water security is the Water Energy Food WEF Nexus research, with research models demonstrating the concept of a circular economy and resting on the use of solar energy in desalination processes for producing fresh water, which is then used for fish farming, from which the effluent water is used in crop cultivation. So it's a full cycle, and the research in this area is quite advanced, and I'll mention a little more about it later, but it's one big topic, focus area of the research that we do here at AUC. The initiative's second area of focus is green architecture and sustainable urban development. AUC's activities in this regard focus on evaluating the carbon footprint of buildings, as well as understanding and minimizing their associated adverse environmental impacts, including construction material, energy consumption, sustainable operation, and emissions. Within this context, the Solar House Initiative at AUC aims at developing a net zero energy house. It also provides a culturally sensitive and fully sustainable housing solution for the Egyptian youth. It's a model, it's a prototype, but this is the aim of this particular initiative as part of the larger approach to this topic. This initiative acts as an environmental and social sanctuary from the harshness of the desert. And of course, this is only one example of the work which is done in this area. The inclusion of sustainable development principles in urban planning is a way forward for cities to mitigate and better adapt climate change impacts, from flooding risks and drought to extreme temperature episodes. Our third area of focus is green financing. With Egypt's issuance of the first green bond in the Middle East and North Africa in 2020, green finance is an area of focus priority nationally and regionally. These needs require the development of guidelines and regulatory frameworks to help countries develop market mechanisms for financing the green transition and to support climate change mitigation measures. Equally important are activities that help understand and address climate-induced risks for business and help enhance the resilience of enterprises, especially micro, small, and medium ones, against climate change. This is an area of focus at AUC to mobilize finance and customize workable regional solutions. Needless to say, sustainability should not undermine national and regional development efforts, and the challenge of reconciling both cannot be overstated. Another important area of focus in our initiative is global health. Activities at AUC address a number of public health aspects in relation to environmental sustainability in general, and more specifically to climate change. We have a long track record of working in this area. I don't have the time to elaborate, but this is a very important area that we've worked on and we will continue to work on. Examples of our efforts include the investigation of climate change impacts on nutritional security of vulnerable populations in Egypt, such as children and the elderly, the impact of air pollutants on pulmonary health, and the impact of water pollutants on aquatic food resources. And this is only to mention a few examples. Our fifth and last area of focus is energy transition. This represents a cornerstone in climate change action and entails a wide range of activities. The focus at AUC addresses renewable energies with activities on solar cell enhanced performance, on hydrogen production research, and novel energy harvesting systems. Over the years, AUC has significantly funded and supported dozens of research projects, initiatives, and activities related to climate change and more generally sustainable development. Academically, AUC has been offering a top-ranking master's program in sustainable development since 2013, focusing on green technologies, entrepreneurship, sustainable cities, and sustainable communities. And in a way, we've been pioneers in training the people who will populate the jobs of the future as it relates to climate change in so many different areas and fields. In 2019, the Center of Excellence for Water was established in line with Egypt's Vision for Sustainable Development 2030. The center is managed by AUC and is located in Alexandria University in a successful partnership between the two institutions. And I want to underscore the importance of partnering and working in collaboration with national institutions, as climate change is not an issue that a single institution or a single body or a single group will be able to manage. This is our collective responsibility, and we can only amplify our impact if we collaborate. And this is a prime example of such collaboration. The center also involves U.S. partners, the University of California, Santa Cruz, Utah State University, Washington State University, and the State of Water Research Center and Temple University. Among the center's many objectives is to fund at least 42 research projects, expand curriculum through 40 new enhanced courses, 4 professional certificates, and 3 degree programs. Also, the center will facilitate the exchange of 100 students to study either at U.S. partner universities or at AUC, and give access to 350 disadvantaged students to study at the center. And as a further testament to our years-long commitment to sustainable development goals, AUC established the Office of Sustainability in 2011. The office's portfolio includes the Biennial University Carbon Footprint Report. This is based on an established solid methodology which AUC showcases and can use in guiding other universities, and in fact has used in guiding other universities of higher education in Egypt and the region when measuring their respective carbon footprints. Hopefully we'll be doing more on this front on a much larger scale, but this is a pioneering effort, and perhaps I hope we'll be able to even do more. The office also includes the Biennial University Sustainability Report and the AUC's Green Guide that provide responsible management of AUC's natural resources and organizes campus outreach and awareness activities. And last but not least, AUC prides itself with the Center for Applied Research on the Environment and Sustainability, CARES, which is under the leadership of Dr. Hani Swalim and a large team of extremely impressive researchers. CARES is a hub for advancing sustainable development and adaptation to climate change in Egypt and the region, using desalination facilities, solar-operated greenhouses, and rooftop gardens that test various growing techniques such as smart hydroponics and integrated aquaculture systems. CARES research is solving real problems in the field of water conservation and recycling, renewable energy, food security, sustainable farming, waste management, and more. And it's designed to work for Egypt. It's not just general hypothetical research on climate change and sustainability, but it's customized to serve the specific needs of Egypt. I would like to reiterate that the success of our initiative and activities relies heavily on the great efforts of AUC's community members who are dedicated to facing the challenges of climate change and are committed to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, thank you, Dr. Mohiddin, for your patience. And allow me now to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin is a leading economist with more than 30 years of experience in international finance and development. Executive Director at the International Monetary Fund, Dr. Mohieddin is among the most prominent voices on the global stage in the fight against climate change. As the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for Egypt, he serves a pivotal role in framing the conversation and advancing the role of countries like Egypt and the Global South as the stakes for the future of our planet are higher than ever. Throughout his career, he has occupied several senior positions at the World Bank and in the government, including Minister for Investment in Egypt. In February 2020, Dr. Mohieddin was appointed UN Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. He also served as World Bank Group Senior Vice President for the 2030 Development Agenda, UN Relations and Partnerships. Beyond his professional career, Dr. Mohieddin is a professor, and I only mentioned some of the highlights. It's really a very rich CV. But beyond this professional career, Dr. Mohieddin is a professor of economics and finance at Cairo University, an honorary professor at Durham University, and a member of the advisory board of the Durham Business School. AUC is also proud to count Dr. Mohieddin among the ranks of its distinguished alumni, having awarded him an honorary degree in 2018 in recognition of his leadership roles in Egypt and on the world stage. In his commencement address to the class of 2018, Dr. Mohieddin delivered three important messages to graduates. His first message was about the importance of perseverance. The second was about inclusiveness, and the third about progress, which Dr. Mohieddin explained can only happen through investments in human capital. Those three life lessons Dr. Mohieddin shared with the graduates have important applications to the search for sustainable and just solutions. Confronting the challenges of climate change will most certainly require perseverance and persistence on the national and global level. It will also necessitate solutions that are inclusive and tailored to the local and regional contexts. Finally, the progress of nations will rest on their ability to mobilize their greatest assets in the form of human capital, our bread and butter as universities. At AUC, we are deeply aware of our responsibility to contribute all we can from the wealth of human capital, our faculty, and the future of generations we graduate, to what will be one of humanity's greatest challenges of our time. In addition to the work of our faculty and the projects I've highlighted, AUC can also play an important role in raising awareness and serving as a meeting place for new and innovative ideas. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Mohieddin at the formal launch of AUC's Climate Change Initiative, a leading academic and an authority in the fields of international finance, economics, and development. Dr. Mohieddin has long warned of the threat that climate inaction poses to economic growth and called for the urgent implementation of a host of intervention. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohieddin, who's joining us via Zoom.
Right, thank you so much. I hope that you can hear me well. Many thanks, Dr. Dallal, for this generous introduction that may have raised already the expectations beyond what I'm going to share with you today. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share with you some thoughts and reflections on the preparations of COP27. This will be, of course, after congratulating the AUC, you, Dr. Dallal, and let me as well recognize Dr. Ramadan and Dr. Hans Whalen and the rest of the leaders in this initiative that is reflecting the important role of the AUC And it seems that through this climate change and sustainability initiative, that the American University in Cairo had managed to mobilize well all of the aspects of what a good university should be doing in aspects related to teaching, application of science, and partnerships to serve community. And the way that you explained the approach of this initiative and its scope and coverage, and I've been reading about the different aspects that you are considering, including adopting a more holistic approach than normal in getting that initiative applied to tackle issues from the sustainability perspective with more water management, waste management, energy management at the forefront of this initiative. It's good as well to recognize that you are going to be reporting regularly on this issues related to disclosure of non-state actors, including universities and research institutions, are now the forefront of the interest of the international community, and I'll come back to that. But it's great to apply international standards while we're doing this initiative. I'm happy as well to say, based on the background notes I received, that the American University in Cairo is the first university in the region to produce carbon footprint report, and the only college in the Middle East and North Africa region ranked in the Princeton Review Guide to Green Colleges. This is a very useful lesson that what you started back in 2011 through the establishment of the Sustainability Office is bringing all of these results. But again, on the different lines of leadership that the AUC is having on teaching, on research, on applying what it teaches, and what is researching on to initiatives and projects and service of the community, not just the local community, but the local community. And I would say even beyond that, when you share the experience with others, and I encourage you, perhaps through Dr. Hannes Whalem in his active role with the university network, to share your experience with others as well. That will have a great effect through the normal spirit of competition between different universities in this network. I listened to you carefully, Dr. Dallal, about the 5 points you mentioned, and let me now get into another 5 points that could really summarize how we see the COP27 being prepared, what could be delivered, especially during such tough developments that the international political scene is seeing, and the tough economic environments around us. In such a world that is really suffering from uncertainty and lack of areas that you can really get different countries and even the multilateral system to agree upon, the challenges of climate change and how to deal with them are subject to possible unification of efforts and power behind them, if we have good leadership to implement what had been promised. And as I said, there are 5 distinctive features of COP27. And I would say that we would assume normally that any COP, and given it's number 27, you would assume that accumulation of knowledge and benefiting from the process, that there is a great deal of bread and butter that you can really rely on in order to say, well, we're not starting from scratch, but there is some sort of critical minimum. And this critical minimum is the promise of the previous COPs. And the reference here is that we don't need really new big announcements demonstrating love and affection to the planet and the people, and how we should be doing better in serving the people in a safer world when it comes to climate challenges. Because I think the dictionary with its different words of commitments have been applied, and there have been many promises that has been mentioned by the former Secretary General of the UN. The promises that count are the promises which are kept, and we see very few promises kept, not all of them. So I would say here that before getting into the 5 areas of focus, that the issues related to what have been happening before COP27, we take stock of them all. We need to know to what extent the promises, the pledges are being applied, and there are reports for that. But I would say that hosting a COP, as you mentioned, Dr. Dallal, in a country like Egypt, representing the South with its strong presence in the neighborhood and the Arab world, in Africa and the Mediterranean and beyond, with very strong ties around the world, you would expect this COP to be more holistic in its approach than previous COPs. I think there have been a kind of suffering from a kind of a reductionist approach to climate change to mean only decarbonization, and for decarbonization to mean a focus on mitigation, and for that all to have a kind of pricing or price tags attached to carbon. I'm not undermining the importance of decarbonization. Actually, this is one of the major efforts that we need to be handling, but it's basically a kind of a holistic approach that we have to adopt here. And when one says holistic, there are 2 ways of defining it. If you talk to the climate community, those who have been spending life attending the COPs, negotiating on the behalf of their countries, reporting on it, researching on it, they would say, well, the holistic here means the 4 aspects: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and the added file, not a discovery, because it was mentioned in the Paris Agreement, but it is that controversial topic of loss and damage. But a holistic, from a developing economy perspective, means the 4 aspects, but you need to put them within sustainable development. After years of suffering because of COVID, after the implications of COVID in economic activity, having more people falling into extreme poverty trap, people suffering from hunger, debt challenges, and then we had the war in the Ukraine, compounded all of these problems. I don't think it's realistic to have the climate agenda and climate action without putting it within its context of the political economy dynamics, and indeed within sustainable development. So all solutions, and I heard the reference to just transition and managing the transition, we need to have all of the efforts towards applying the promises and the actions in climate agenda, in the climate agenda, within that holistic approach. We cannot ignore poverty, we cannot ignore hunger, we cannot ignore jobs and creation of jobs, and we cannot ignore an inclusive approach to the whole agenda, including the impact of climate on children, youth, and women. So a holistic approach here is what we adopt. And the idea here is basically to not to create a new framework, because the Sustainable Development Goals framework, Vision 2030, in the case of Egypt, Vision 2030, and Vision 2063, in the case of Africa, could be just good guiding lines. We don't need new frameworks. We just need to apply what we have. And at the end of the day, climate action is SDG 13. So it's basically through that approach we are adopting the issues of implementation to the climate action. That gets me into the second point. You may have heard the President of the Republic, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, in his speech in the Energy and Climate event or summit a few days ago that was hosted by the United States. The word implementation and application and commitments to be delivered had been referenced in this very short speech. If you check the COP27 portal, which is available now, you'll see that repeated again in the address by the President to the potential participants, or the points of introduction by Minister Shukri at the President of the COP, or the coordinating minister, the Minister of Environment, Dr. Yasmin Fuad. So this issue of implementation is basically dominating the scene. And as much as we can, coming from the non-state actors side, if there is a good idea, let's projectize it, as exactly you did it. You have good ideas, you have been teaching about them, so how to apply them in your scale with a hope that this could be scaled up or replicated somewhere else. If it is a good idea, so let's apply it. If it is a project in existence, let's scale it up. If it is a new idea, feasible and tested in experimental phase, let's apply it. And here, this issue of operationalization, projectizing, implementation are going to be the main areas of tests for the success of this COP. The third area, which I referred to, and the AUC is benefiting from that and benefiting the community at the same time. It's not just about Egypt and the local community, it's about the region, the Arab countries, the Mediterranean, the African countries, and beyond. And I'm happy to say that we got the agreement for the first time ever in the history of applying the COPs and the COPs approach to climate change is to have an alignment between the COP agenda, SDG 13, and the rest of the SDGs. And we're going to have 5 big events to have some sort of matchmaking between the promise of finance coming from different institutions, including the recently announced funding from the GFANZ, which was announced in Glasgow, with the pipeline of projects, because what we have been really hearing from different groups, those who have the projects and they claim that they have them, they would say we have the projects, but we don't have the funds. Then you get the likes of the GFAN say, well, we have more than $130 trillion assets under management committed to support areas of investments, especially in mitigation, decarbonization, and race to zero, but we don't see the project. So I think here it's basically a very practical approach based on a country platform design that we are going to be having 5 regional roundtables, and I'm inviting you to participate in them in any capacity you wish as potential advisors, consultants, to take notes about what happened. That could be an area of research. I'm happy to share with you the dates to document this first of a kind experiment. And they are going to be hosted between the months of July and August, and will be reporting on the outcomes on the finance days in Cairo from the 7th to the 9th. And then we'll be reporting again about the whole process during the COP days and the conference in November in Sharm el-Sheikh. And of course, the 5 regions are known: Africa, covered by UNACA, the Arab countries through Beirut and ESCWA, the SCAP covering Asia, and then we have ECLAC covering Latin America and the Caribbean, and the rest of the emerging markets and developing economies covered in the office in Geneva. So that would be a good way to have good engagement around the world. It's going to be hybrid as well, so that will minimize the footprint of traveling and associated activities. The fourth area of work, which is about localization. And I've been telling colleagues from OECD countries and advanced economies, it is customary for rich countries, Denmark, France, more recently in the UK in Glasgow, to host big conferences to be attended by 30,000 plus of participants. Heads of state will be coming. But the ordinary people would always wonder, what's in it for us? Why do we have this conference? Especially, that was a kind of a normal query, which is legitimate and it should be answered. Why we're spending time and effort and cost to host these summits? Of course, there is a great deal of national pride and exposure, and there are many co-benefits on hosting big conferences. But in times of crises, food crisis, increase in the price of fertilizers, increase in prices of energy, if we are not demonstrating well that the climate action can provide solutions to these problems, and actually it is in proper investments in mitigation and more in the adaptation front, investments in renewables and energy, investments in the food system and the supply chain to be improved, ordinary people will be always have these questions. So what could be the best solution to that? Coming from a village myself in the Delta, I thought of an idea with many in the ministries, and we are going to be hearing very soon the announcement of this. Again, this is a second, first of a kind initiative to be associated with the COP, is to have a bottom-up approach. The 27 governorates of Egypt are going to be participating through their big, small, medium enterprises, through their startups, through their women-led projects, through their community development projects. In those 6 categories, they are going to be in competition for 2 months to pick the smarter and the greener of the projects. It's not about competition who's winning. It's basically about the dynamics of proving that the governorates have something to offer. The districts and the governorates have all of these talents and skills that can really have a chance to demonstrate what they are doing. And the winners at the governorate level are going to be sharing their experience to pick 18 winners at the national level. And again, it's not about who's going to have the trophy, but it's basically about the process leading to that with kind of education and kind of, it's going to be beyond the simulation exercises that AUC has been conducting for many years. I've done that as well at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science. And I saw people learning, I would say, even more in some particular subject than learning by heart what's in the books and memos of teaching. So this process, I hope, and this is the second invitation I'm sharing with you, is basically through your presence in Cairo and beyond, that perhaps you might be called on or upon by governors, by ministers, to provide your advice, your expertise. You could be part of the governorate level or national level judgment and refereeing if you wish to do so through your faculty and your experts and your centers as well. I'm happy that I'm not in a position to release more information about that, because this was just presented today to the High Committee led by the Prime Minister and presented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Environment, and I was there to cover some details on that. So you'll hear more about it, but you'll get more invitations for practical participation. And I think your initiative today, with all of its different aspects, qualifies you definitely to play an important role, either at the governorate level, perhaps in Greater Cairo governorates, or more, I would expect, at the national level. And there will be many partners from the nationally based entities, and there will be many international partners from the UN system and leaders in business and in tech, finance, and beyond. My final point is, which is the 5th point, on finance. All of the above, be holistic as you wish, try to implement what you can, be regional, do some sort of localization efforts. Without finance, money, and investment, nothing will really progress. Without the resources, available to us. And here is not just the financial resources, but the technology, the knowledge, that will not really be feasible, any of these ideas. Actually, good ideas may end up with frustration if you don't have adequate resources to them. So you would expect that from COP27, the following. First, that the famous 100 billion promise since Copenhagen is going to be subject to scrutiny, and how much had been delivered, and what is the metric of delivery, and what is the impact of whatever being delivered. So the usual discussion about the 100 billion is going to be there. The second point is the role of the private sector, and I just mentioned one aspect of it through the commitments of the GFANs with their $130 trillion, but there is more on the role of the business sector at the domestic level, regional and international, and there are going to be updates on that. The third, it's a world that is facing debt more than ever before as a challenge. We are at the peak, perhaps, of the fourth wave of global debt, and we are offering some suggestions on debt reduction mechanisms, and through, you can consider it as a kind of swap from debt to investment in climate and nature, and we'll be providing some updates on this particular topic. The fourth is about establishment of carbon market. I know that there are carbon markets already active, especially in Europe, which is very advanced, but the idea is to establish a carbon market with the features based on international standards, but suitable for the requirements of emerging market and developing economy, like the one in Egypt, and there are efforts that are going to be announced on that front. The fifth, that there have been great concern about greenwashing, and this because of the absence of a dependable criteria. And I hope that by the time of COP27, the findings of an important report led by a committee formed by the Secretary General and coordinated by the Minister of Environment and Climate, the former Minister of Canada, Minister McKenna, that we may have the findings. No promises on that, but I just, as I said and emphasized, I hope that the preliminary findings of this report will be shared widely on that. There are more on the finance side, including what the AFC of Africa, it's the African Finance Corporation, call it Finnovation. And I know that you have many experts in your centers and the business school working on different solutions on the finance front. So this will be my third invitation to you, perhaps to get engaged with us, please, on the finance and investment framework that we are establishing. I'll be more than happy to share through you or whomever you are deciding on from your faculty or your centers, the preliminary drafts before they are shared for your consideration and comments to enhance the contents on substance and to improve the applicability of the recommendations. Having said that, let me conclude by thanking you for this opportunity, congratulating you for being up to the expectations associated with the name of the AUC by mobilizing your skills, your talents, your knowledge, and your enthusiasm to be on the lead and get this initiative out. And now the second part then, as I suggested, is to take it beyond the AUC as you normally do, share the merits and the substance of it with other leading higher education institutions and academic centers in Egypt and beyond for the benefit to be more widespread. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin, for a rich discussion and presentation, insights, and invitations for AUC participation in some of the initiatives. We'll definitely follow up with you on that and see how we can actually get more actively involved in all of them. So we do have some time, a few minutes for taking questions. questions can be to Dr. Mohiddin or President Dallal, and so we'll open the floor. So by raise of hand, and I would please request that you just introduce yourself and say, just inform us where you're from. Dr. Salah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin, for the very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. Just a few days ago, you mentioned in one of your talks about there is a business opportunity equivalent to $24.7 trillion in green buildings. And of course, green buildings, our building sector is a very important sector contributing heavily to climate change. I think they contribute almost to 40% of the greenhouse gases. And therefore, the green building with this $24.7 trillion is a very, very good opportunity. Now, in the United States, there is almost about 2 million buildings green. In UK, there is almost about 600,000 building green. In Egypt, we never reach 100 buildings. In Africa, we never reach thousands of buildings. And I think this is a very important area to be included in COP27. If you remember, in COP26, there is one day called Built Environment. But unfortunately, in the first draft agenda for COP27, there is no one day for Built Environment. Then I hope to have, one day in the COP27 directed toward green buildings or green buildings and community. That is my first question. I have one comment.
Quickly, yes, please.
Yes, I will. At AUC, we published a book in 2015 about net zero as considered the next global industrial revolution, authored by me and contributed by some of my students. And I've been teaching part of this book during the last 7 years. And we have very strong belief with the net zero is the only solution to climate change. And COP26, they initiated the net zero concept to be used. And very soon I will have some kind of webinar to convert the net zero initiative in COP26 into net zero action plan in COP27. Now, what I mean by action plan is to have this net zero to be translated as a new dimension to climate change, because climate change can be, solved by mitigation and adaptation. But we added one more dimension, which is utilization. And therefore, the net zero can be utilized, can utilize the greenhouse gases in a very good business opportunities. Very soon, maybe within a couple of weeks or so, I will give some kind of talk about the road to net zero. And I think this is a very important to be included within COP27. Thank you. And my name is Salah Al-Haggar. I'm a professor here at AUC in Energy and Sustainable Development in Mechanical Engineering Department.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. So any questions to, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Mine is much more a recommendation. My name is Rashad Bani Samari, and I'm a graduate student in public policy here at AUC. Thank you very much, Doctor, for the points that you mentioned. Very much interesting. I would love just to recommend that maybe during COP27, we have a session addressing the issue of climate change and security. I know that some months ago, a couple of countries in the sub-Saharan African region made recommendations at the UN so that climate change is considered as a security issue, but it was rejected. Maybe COP27 could be an ideal platform to discuss this issue. We know that Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, etc., are in a situation of terrorism, and we have inter-community conflicts due to lack of resources, namely water, etc. So maybe this could be discussed and then push forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, we have two here. We have one in the back. We'll start with the ones here. Please.
Dr. Mahmoud, thank you so much for the insightful notes. My question is,
Can you
your
introduce
opinion-
yourself briefly? Sorry. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Saleh. I'm a graduate student at Public Policy here in AUC. My question for Dr. Mahmoud is whether you believe this COP being here in Egypt and in Africa could be a potential for more discussion on the funding and how the effects of climate change is unequal. And we're seeing it more here in the region other than other regions of the world. Do you think this will have an effect, or this could mean more potential for funding for Egypt and developing countries or not?
Dr. Mahmoud, would you like to give any thoughts, any responses
Right.
on that?
Right, as expected, in a discussion at the AUC, many important and substantive questions. Let me start first by Dr. Salah. I'm very impressed with your leadership in your field, and we kept referring to your work, especially when people ask for verification of green housing, green cities, and we appreciate really your work on that. The industries involved, including building material, steel, cement, are subject to a great deal of efforts in decarbonization, and there are many initiatives. Some of them will be shared during the COP. As you know, there is an initiative by the cement industry in Egypt. They presented their approach a few weeks ago, and they are working hard on this area. There is some work as well in the steel industry and in the transport of the building material as well. Will be discussed. The issues about standards and promotion of green housing, green building, and the compliance of some of the new initiatives, including Decent Life program, Haya Karima, are being guided. But to what extent this guidance is really applying international standards, that will be discussed further with the Minister of Housing in my next visit in July, and issues related to verification of green buildings as well need to be considered. On your work on Race to Zero, as you know, the non-state actors are about 3 campaigns: Race to Zero, Race to Resilience, and the GFANs, and there will be updates on that on the 3 initiatives. Through you and through your partnerships and network, the developing economies and countries of the South are not adequately represented in any of these initiatives and coalitions. Again, we can provide updates. I got a couple of colleagues from the networks in Egypt to promote these coalitions and Races to Zero and Resilience, but it's through your partnership that you need more voices from the South represented. And we'll be happy to discuss further offline with you or anybody who is interested on how to be part of the global movements on that front. On the issues related to climate change and security, during the last couple of days, I participated at an event at the Aswan Forum that had a focus on peace, and there will be a discussion on that issue at the margins of one of the youth events. But the idea here is basically, if you want that to be more visible, we need to have, as it happened with another proposal. I remember the adaptation was only part of the food and agriculture was only part of the adaptation day, but with the insistence on the importance of food security, agriculture, and trade in food items, it had a separate day now as one of the thematic days. So perhaps we can do the same, either for the green buildings or for links between peace, security, and climate change. But the proposals need to be articulated. with good justification and evidence, because there is some good competition there. And of course, the coordinator of that is the Minister of Environment, Dr. Yasmin. On the final point, I refer to issues of finance and funding, and as the fifth point, there will be some serious discussion about opportunities through partnerships. Yes, the 100 billion and the concessional finance are there, but I'm betting more on the opportunities of investments in the mitigation front, and a fair portion of finance for adaptation by the multilateral development banks, the MDBs, and the international financial institutions. If you manage really to have this kind of good realization of the comparative advantage of funding, private sector needs to have an open way to demonstrate its skills, capacity, and competition and funding for mitigation, as we see it in solar energy or in other renewables. And we need to have more public finance dedicated, because the business case in many subsectors of adaptation is not fully realized by the business sector to make sense for the private sector to finance it. The business sector can be part of implementation, but not in funding. But issues related to finance, funding, conventional and innovative ways in dealing with them, they will have great deal of attention, either from the regional roundtables in July and August, either on the 7th to the 9th of September in Cairo for African finance and beyond, and of course the specific dates for finance during the summit itself and the rest of the activities in November in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud. We have time for another maybe 2 questions. So, we have 10 hands now. So there is yourself, and followed by you, Dr. Ali Aouni, Dr. Laila, and then finally, and then we'll conclude. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud, for the great talk. My name is Noura Wahbi, and I'm an assistant professor at the Public Policy and Public Administration Department. My question is just a reflection on the recent implications of what the Federal Reserve has just recently talked about, maybe triggering a recession, and just in general, kind of the global living crisis, the cost of living crisis that's been happening in different countries. So what would the implications of this be on the financial promises that we would be expecting in COP, but also a general commitment to climate change initiatives? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another couple of questions before we allow Dr. Mahmoud to respond. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mohiddin. First of all, I wanted to ask regarding the importance of the private sector in Egypt and investment in the private sector. So what are some of the incentives that could be offered to actually allow the private sector to integrate green technologies, and at the same time, it would be profitable to them? And the second question regarding this point, how can educational institutions, especially, for example, like in AUC, how can we integrate in the schools of business, seeing that many of the top leaders and business leaders in the Egyptian community graduate from AUC? So how can we integrate the idea of development and sustainability in the core curriculums and in the curriculums in such schools? Thank you so much.
And you are?
My name is Farid Hani. I'm senior economics here at AUC and minoring in international relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Laila?
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohiddin, for your lecture. And I just want to capitalize on your presence. We have a project ongoing here at AUC, the Public Policy Hub, and we have a round of operation, 4 months working on climate change related issues. So we'd like you to suggest to us priorities, policy issues that we can tackle. Graduate students would work on over the coming months and come up with policy research and briefs that may be presented during the forthcoming conference, COP27.
Dr. Laila, I mean, we know who you are. Can you just maybe share with Dr. Mohiddin?
I think I introduced myself, Laila Al-Baradei, a professor of public administration at AUC, formerly at Cairo University. So I've been meeting in different contexts and bothering Dr. Mahmoud in different ways. Thank you.
And maybe one last question, Dr. Ali Aouni.
Ali Aouni, Business School. You've talked about the political economy aspect. Let me give you what happened in COP26. President Biden talked about climate change, and the US will take a lead in it. Now, the moment he went back to the US, he started pressuring OPEC to produce more oil to ease energy pricing. A week ago, Chevron was in Egypt talking about increasing exploration in oil. So and the Russian-Ukrainian issue is now all of a sudden people are talking about the East Mediterranean natural gas corridor. Germany, for example, since 2014, are a major user of coal in producing energy. When you talk about Africa, there are many African countries that depends on fossil fuel for their growth. I'm talking about Egypt, natural gas, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria. So I feel there is really like two different spheres. One of them, which is more eminent, which is more on the ground, and you're dependent on fossil fuel. And on the other side, we talk about we're gonna do energy, climate, green housing and green whatever, but still the fact remains that the majority is fossil fuel based, and the majority of the economics and the growth of countries depends on fossil fuel. Even in Europe, I mean, they're not talking about green energy. They're talking really about other sources of fossil fuel for their energy sources. So I just wanted you to comment on this and how do you compensate on this, because you're going to end up having the same situation where you get countries committing to certain things that never happens, and other countries that tells them, well, you can go to, sorry, excuse me, English, to hell. We're not going to do this because we're still going to need soft fossil fuel for our development. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mahmoud, would you like to address the points before we take, a couple of last questions?
Right. Okay. Those 5 points perhaps need another lecture or another discussion. Let me start by the last, and I think the fifth comment, and perhaps could be answered at length, but whatever work Dr. Baradei will be considering as well. So I'm referring the point of Dr. Aouni, and he was very much spot on to what could be considered at length. I give you a brief answer, but I think some sort of evidence considering the political economy dynamics, how to draft public policy, issues related to managing the transition. I think these all are important topics for the consideration of the School of Governance and Dr. Laila and her esteemed colleagues. And I know what she's capable of, and the team of researchers, scholars, if they tackle these issues. So Dr. Aouni, yes, the issue here is, well, we can call it in different names, politely or not politely, about the promises and lack of delivery. But let me just say something about what happened even before the war in the Ukraine, that the fuel mix from March 2021 to September 2021 had increased in the European countries by almost 90%. And this had nothing to do with the war in the Ukraine. Days before Glasgow, some European countries reopened their plants dependent on coal as fuel to produce electricity. So that's not new. This had been there for quite some time. The issues about being opportunistic, the short-term pressure against the mid-term, long-term pressures. And that's why we're not re-achieving the targets on the trajectory of reducing emissions by 45%. We are actually increasing the emissions by 14% for such acts and their impact in the field, not just on the energy side, but in other sectors. So are deviating from target by 60%. So the issues here about actions and implementation are required. So what I'm seeing after the war in the Ukraine, two opposing dynamics. One, that we have to provide energy from any source at any cost, from any kind of energy source, including hydrocarbon, coal was included, oil. natural gas that was not considered as a clean energy. Now it's by the EU being considered as an energy for transition period. How this transition will be there with us, it depends really on many factors, including the technology and cost and availability of access to renewables. We know now that renewables are much more affordable to have compared to, say, 10 years ago. When you established your sustainability office in 2011, compared to now is 95% less than the cost of solar compared to 2011 as a reference point. So I think here, the short term, being desperate, under pressure, you need to produce energy, so you'll do whatever you can. The concern, if these actions in the short term are going to be compromising the investment that are required for the midterm, long term. But I'm seeing now, out of energy security, the interest in investments in renewables have been enhanced. Partnerships, including with Egypt and other countries in Africa, to provide electricity to Europe from clean sources. This is another aspect of investments. So I see the challenge, but I see as well the huge opportunities from the electricity front, then the green hydrogen front, and on other aspects of work that we are considering for the future of energy. Others call it hypocrisy. I didn't call it that, but these kind of actions. So I'm just saying short-term, mid-term, long-term management, and I'm looking at the investment opportunity on that front. Then on the public policy and the agenda for work, I would claim with all humility that that the 5 topics I mentioned, each one of them is an area of public policy. And we can discuss that further with you. But I think this issue of managing the transition and the political economy dynamics and the pressure on the policymakers to deliver, and while there are competing goals and targets and the trade-offs, this is another aspect that you can consider, Dr. Brady. And the issue on curriculum and how to be enhanced, Dr. Hamis Waylam knows through the university network that one of the aspects, yes, there are busy producing policy papers of different length and emphasis, but enhancing the curriculum and making the knowledge, actually 2 things that are going to be transforming this world. It's either you consider them to win, or you will be, God forbid, outside the competition, as it should be the case. Green, and actually those are the subjects of the competition at the governorate level. Green and smart, digital transformation, the implications of the 4th industrial revolution, and the other aspect, which is related to green transformation and the sustainability. So those are the 2 wings, not just of companies, but for countries to be ahead in the curve. Dr. Dallal reminded me of progress. So I would really say that progress is basically captured, constrained, or either enhanced and catalyzed by our understanding and knowledge of what sustainability means and what digital transformation would really entail. And then the issues related to the other crises that were mentioned. I'm seeing the issues related to inflation, matters related to food insecurity, energy prices, that in the short term, all of these disparate acts are there. And as you know, there is the global crisis group by the Secretary General dealing with the short-term measures on how to minimize the impact of the Ukraine crisis on Africans and beyond. But I think the solution is basically either through adaptation and investments in adaptation, or in the energy side. That would be really the force behind the change if we take that seriously. It's a tough time to conduct this kind of business that goes beyond the short-term pressure, dealing with them, but at the same time, we're not forgetting, we're not just talking about future generations, basically about the current generation and its way to survive. In the past, they were talking about climate as if it's kind of for the far future kind of challenge. Now, the farmers, those who live in coastal areas, people who are exposed to severe weather and impact, they know it's immediate danger that we need to deal with, let alone the compounded impact for the future if we are doing nothing today.
Thank you, Dr. Mohiddin. And we have time just for, I mean, there are 5 hands. We'll only be able to take 3 questions. And sorry for the other people. We can, this can go on for the whole afternoon. So we have 1 question here from,
Hi, thank you, Dr. Mohiddin, for the insightful discussion. My name is Amira, and I'm alumna of the Masters of Sustainable Development at the University of Florida, and I'm here participating in the Public Policy Hub. My question is related to greenwashing at the private sector and the transitioning into a green economy. So basically, what's your thoughts on how can we measure and manage private businesses' impact on the society and the environment? And here I want to refer to the sustainability reporting mechanism and also a third-party verification that would probably give businesses who apply these standards the certification, for example. So what are your thoughts on this, and would COP27 have any discussion around this? Also, how can we put into practice the ESG decree that has been issued in July that obliged the stock market companies to report on their environmental, social, and governance practices? Thank you.
Thank you. So you still have your question? Yes?
My name is Hiba Karmani. I'm one of the graduates of the Sustainable Development Program from AUC. I would like to thank Dr. Ahmad Dallal and Dr. Adham, Dr. Hani Swaylam, and Dr. Salah Al-Haggar. And thank you so much for your speech today and for your time. I'm a technical head at Emirates Green Building Council and a board member at Egypt Green Building Council. And I would like to call and second Dr. Salah's request on the Built Environment Day at COP27 and how we can relate the circular economy to the built environment. And thank you so much. This was my comment. Thank you so much.
Dr. Hanadi, you have a question?
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation and the multiple initiatives. It's very important to all of us. In fact, I just would like to capitalize on several points that were raised by you and by my colleagues here related to how to create a clean environment by controlling maybe processing in Egypt or globally. When we're talking about processing here, we're talking about buildings, we're talking about manufacturing industries, heavy industries, which produce a lot of pollution. So here at AUC, we've realized this issue maybe since 2016, and we've coupled the digital transformation with manufacturing processes so that we have processes that are capable of producing building materials, steels, different types of metallic materials using techniques that are clean, which is something we definitely would like to use and implement everywhere to minimize the pollution that could be produced from those processes, which also links to what Dr. Haggar has mentioned. So I think adding also this into consideration as how to minimize pollution using processes that are clean would be very important, because again, this will add to the initiative made to improve or to minimize pollution worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanadi. And we'll have one last comment or question from our World Bank guests.
Thank you. I'm Federica Ranghieri with the World Bank, and I'm very happy to be here. Actually looking forward to cooperating further with the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Initiative. Thanks again for the presentation. Dr. Mohiddin, I would have, I guess it's the last question, so I'm really worried. but it would be a tough one. So I would like to see what, in your view, would be the best legacy of COP for Egypt, for Africa, and globally. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll give the floor to Dr. Mohiddin to respond and before concluding the session.
Right. It's good that we have this very interesting group of questions. Some of them are easier to answer than others. Ms. Heba Kermani's secondment to of the ideas of Dr. Al-Haggar to have a dedicated day or to the theme on green buildings. As I said, it's part of another or bigger scheme on the solution side. You want to have a dedicated day. Dr. Yasmin's office doors are open. I will convey that on my capacity as non-state actor, as I did before, with some success in other areas of work. The issues as well raised by Dr. Hanadi are well taken. Is not just about the approach, it's basically how to implement, and the processes are taken to push the agenda further. On the first question, yes, well, the idea of having sustainability indices, criteria on non-price competition are not new. I remember when that was in 2007, we created, when I was in government still, for the stock exchange, a sustainability index with Standard & Poor's. And that was the second in the world after India did something similar. But now I think what was considered as a good additional nice to do thing on voluntary basis, now it's becoming now as part of the involuntary compliance, and disclosure should be compulsory, and the impact should be realized, and the transparency should be enhanced, and the metric needs to be agreed upon. And then the greenwashing, it's a mix of two things, either because people say in any kind of practice that they cannot compare what comes from you with others, and here they say, well, it could be an element of greenwashing, or there is some sort of deliberate action to manipulate and mislead. The best solution to that, as we do with accounting standards, with auditing standards, and I know that you have great professors at the AUC in both, and then on Basel standards with capital requirements for banks and the financial institutions. We follow standards. When you have these kind of reporting standards, it will be really very easy for comparison, for supervision, for monitoring, for disclosure, and for the general public and those who are saving their money. They would know if the investment vehicle is adhering to the rules or not. So that's why I'm relying very much on the outcomes of this committee led by Minister McKenna to tell us what went right, what went wrong, and what are the best practices that we can adhere to. And then to get that into the regulatory environment by the IOSCO, by the BIS, by the accounting standards bodies, and here the issues of the disclosure concern that you mentioned, and including on the ESG, will be much easier to deal with. Then on that question, the tough question by my good colleague from the World Bank, well, COPs are being always remembered with something. There is always a line to remember the COP with. If this COP is going to be associated with better recognition to the importance of adaptation and adequate finance for it, along with other aspects, and putting the implementation and criteria for monitoring the implementation on track, I would call it a success. So these are basically the ways to do it. Implications on the World Bank, with all great appreciation to the work that the World Bank and other institutions are doing. It's basically the implications of that is for the World Bank and other IFIs to reach at least parity when it comes to adaptation. So if this is the way to enhance, nudge, if not push, the IFIs to have more recognition of adaptation, and instead of seeing funding from the World Bank and other IFIs of less than 20% of its total portfolio to be more or closer to 50%, that will be a point of transformation. If I see the World Bank and other IFIs doing less on crowding out the private sector through their loans to governments and allowing the private sector through leveraging, de-risking, and enhancing the role of the private sector through the finances, that will be a good point for transformation. If I'm going to realize that the developing economies and emerging markets, instead of being recognized as victims, which is the case, and to start seeing a good fair share of funding, not just for the low-income countries, but the middle-income country, that will be a start of a change. So it's all about these reference points that will be created as benchmarks in Sharm el-Sheikh to make a kind of a long-term transformation. So your challenging question is going to be with a challenging answer in the application going forward, and there will be better monitoring than what we have so far, because the disclosure requirements are going to be very much different than the more generic approach that we are having. So good luck with the implementation.
In conclusion, we'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Mohiddin, for your time, for being with us here, and for your insightful thoughts and information that is very valuable for us. We'll definitely follow up with you if you allow us to do so on some of the points that you've mentioned, to actually get us more involved in some of the initiatives we've talked about. And we will certainly, we're working on our participation in COP27. So we're certainly, we'll see us there, and we look forward to a successful COP27. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best, and congratulations again for the great initiative. Well done.